Thanks for joining us for the first lesson in C2C Creation to Completion. I trust that you have your outline. I trust that you have a Bible and a pen ready. If you don't have a Bible, that's fine because the verses are on the inside as you open up that handout you've got. On the front of the handout, you'll notice some blue questions under that spot where you can draw a picture. Let's take some time to discuss those issues. How do you think all creation came about? What role does humanity play in creation? How would you rate yourself in the whole scheme of the universe? So press pause, have some time in your group to discuss these questions, and then come back and press play when you're ready. The Bible opens in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, and in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the Bible doesn't seek to prove God's existence. It just simply launches off into God creating everything. And if you understand that Moses was with God, you understand why this is so. Moses was on the mountain receiving from God the law or the Torah for Israel, and so he saw God. He didn't need proof of God. The Israelites were wandering around the desert and God was leading them. They could see the aura of God and they didn't need proof. If you look at Exodus chapter 40 verse 34 to 38, you begin to see God's presence among his people Israel. Then the cloud covered the tent of the meeting and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. In all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and the fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel during all their travels. Did they need proof? Well, of course not, because they had God with them. And what we see in the scriptures is God is so powerful that he creates almost everything by the power of his word. God speaks and creation comes into being. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. In Genesis 1:9, and God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered into one place and let dry ground appear." And it was so. It happened because God spoke. In Genesis 1:14 we read, "And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years." And we read, it was so. And so what we find, if you look at the front of your handout, you've got the word creation, and you look at the consonant CRTN, and down the right hand side of that picture, those consonants tell us what's happening in the creation scene. God is creator. God is ruler. God expects total obedience, and there is no bad. We'll look at each one of those as we push along. But for now, what we see is that God created everything. If you take the whole universe, put it into a rectangle, God created everything in that rectangle. Now again, in a moment, press pause and discuss some questions. How different is that from your view of creation? So we see that God created the universe. And so creation is an act of God. Now if God created everything, that makes him the ruler. You might like to draw these pictures in that box on your handout. We draw a crown because God is king, he is the ruler, and we write God inside the crown because he is the rightful king of all creation because he created it. And now God creates in verses 26 and 27 mankind, humanity, with a special purpose, in a special relationship. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him male and female. He created them. And so we go back to that front page. We see the picture so far. God has created everything. He is the rightful ruler, and we see that he creates man and woman. They're given the names Adam and Eve early on in the Bible. And God creates humanity with a special purpose. Now here's a discussion question. How does your view of yourself change when you consider that God has given you a role and purpose in all creation? Why do you think God wanted a relationship with humanity? Press pause, discuss it, and come back to the video. And so we see that God is in a crown. He's the creator, the king, the ruler of everything. He is Lord over Adam and Eve, the two people. And what God expects is that Adam and Eve do the work he's given to them. So Genesis 1:28 outlines that for us. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." And so what we see is that God expects total obedience. He expects man and woman under God's kingship to be totally obedient. They are to do what he has told them to do. And you notice that Adam and Eve are smiling. They're in God's created world. They're under God's rule. They are living in total obedience, and they are totally, blissfully happy. Now look what God says about his creation. God saw the light that he created, and it was good. In Genesis 1:10, God called the dry ground land, and the waters that he gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was, there's that word again, good. In Genesis 1:12, the land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seed according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. 1:21, no prizes for guessing. So God created the creatures of the sea and every living and moving thing within which the water teems, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. 1:25, we see the same thing. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And then, at the end of chapter 1 of Genesis, as God looks at all creation with humanity living in obedience, total obedience to the will of God, God sums it all up. Genesis 1:31. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. It was perfect. It was wonderful. It was blessed, because everything was according to its purpose. Now, we mentioned earlier that Adam and Eve were smiling. You see, they got this huge grin on their faces. They are grinning because God has created everything, because he's ruler, he is their king. They are totally obedient. There is no bad in this creation. There is no sickness. There are no tears of hurt and heartache. There are no relational crises or problems. There are no letdowns. There are no hurts. There is no death or dying or mourning or pain. There's no bad. And everything, as we saw, is very good. So again, take some time for discussion. What do you think it would have been like to live in this perfect world? If you could be transported back in time to that perfect world where there is no bad, what would you experience? What would you feel? What would you see? What emotions would well up within you? Press pause, talk about it in your group, and then come back and we will finish up. So as we come to a close for this week, this is now an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you have a question, your leader will answer that question for you. Those questions that we started with on the front of the sheet are answered from a biblical point of view on the back of your sheet. Take some time this week to actually read those answers. And again, if you have questions, write them down. If you've got issues, write them down. Bring them next week and we will deal with them together in our group. before we meet again next time, can I encourage you, can I urge you to do some reading? 3 chapters. Genesis chapter 1 and 2, the narrative of creation, and Psalm 8, which also looks at creation. Now don't worry if you don't know where they are. Your leader can put a bookmark in your Bible, and during the week you find the particular bookmarks and you can read those chapters. Again, bring back any questions or issues or thoughts that you might have, and they'll be discussed before we start on our next topic, the corruption. And so thank you for joining us. We look forward to our next lesson, corruption, and meeting together with you. God bless.